Hello, and welcome to our next chapter, next episode in this series. Do This, Not That, for physician engagement, retention, and well being. This is such a hot topic. And according to AMA, in 2021, 117,000 doctors left the profession. So if you have been at the receiving end of it as an administrator, as a leader, as a physician, or as a patient, this special chapter is for you. And we have been using these twin books as our guides. Enhanced Physician Engagement by ACHE by Healthcare Administration Press. One is on strategy, one is on tactics. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Kathleen Forbes. She is definitely a very, very well accomplished physician leader, and a very, very bold mentor of many, many physician leaders and physicians in their lives. She's right now in Memphis, Tennessee, but she has been in so many places at such big positions. She has been executive vice president of academic group at Methodist La Bonheur Healthcare. Dr. Forbes, is that the right way to say it?
Yes.
Yes, and she oversaw the majority of operations for healthcare system, and she has made it a point to get formal leadership education and experience as part of her experience, as her physician experience. She has obviously been a very well accomplished physician on her own. Welcome, Dr. Forbes.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Dr. Forbes, your chapter is absolutely unique, as in it has not just a focus, it has a focus. For example, we know, as you highlight accurately, that there are more doctors which are going to be women now. But you said that women are also majority decision makers in healthcare. So what inspired you to write this chapter?
I sure appreciate that question. And I will tell you, as somebody that has enjoyed a long clinical and administrative career, some of the things I write about are very similar experiences to what I've gone through in my journey as well. But to your point, yes, we know that there's a lot of information out there, more people, more of the folks entering medical school are going to be females, etc. And so we know that. We also know statistically that the medical decisions in the families are being made by the females predominantly. And as I started to think about the issues that I face, that I think many of my colleagues and folks that I mentor have faced, I realized there was a need to really put it into this chapter and allow us all to think through it and reflect on it. And I very intentionally, as I wrote this chapter, I wanted to make sure that I put in there, what can we do about it? It's great to know what's wrong, but what can we do about it? And so a bit of a passion came forward in terms of wanting to write a chapter like that. And so that's exactly what I did.
So what's the number one thing that an administrator or a healthcare leader needs to know from this chapter?
Yeah. That it's not one size fits all. It is, you can't look at one physician leader, one physician, one potential leader as the same thing as what you just saw in another person. And I really tried to hit on some of the influences and why you need to think through this and how we need to educate ourselves, because it's not the same. Not everyone is exactly the same, and there's different issues affecting each one of their careers that you really need to step back and be aware of and use as an opportunity to act in accordance with that. So if there's anything, it's just one size doesn't fit all.
Is there a particular story you remember that made you write this?
Yeah. It's so hard for me to isolate just one, because I know that through my career, when I was in medical school, less than a third of my classmates were female. And what really struck me was, first of all, what fields were they choosing? Almost none of my female colleagues went into specialty, different fields that were specialized. Most of them went into primary care, either pediatrics, family medicine, or internal medicine. And in fact, when we would have sessions prepping us for what residency we should select into, there seemed to be a focus that women needed to think about these careers. The only exception I can recall to this day was anesthesia, because we could set our hours a little more conveniently. And so that stood out for me in terms of, so I had actually toyed with the idea of being a plastic surgeon. And I too had to think about what it was that I wanted from my personal life as well as my career, because I was a newly engaged medical student, and I knew I wanted a family, and I was looking and studying what a surgery residency would entail and how, I would manage that, along with what additional training would be needed. So, it did affect me personally. I thought a lot about that, and I reflected on that when I wrote this chapter. But that's a piece of a story that I'd like to share. But I also think there's just ongoing things that have made me think about the importance of this chapter. And one of those things has happened to me so many times in my career, I almost chuckle now when it happens, which is that, I'll be in a room full of people and I'll be speaking as the leader in that room. And here I've been introduced as doctor, and yet I will get a question, perhaps from a layperson, where they'll say, well, when's the doctor going to talk? Because they've automatically assumed I was the nurse. And so, I think that's something that we all have an opportunity to think about as, we address and work through the workforce, especially as it comes down to physicians.
Let me ask you the flip question then, which is, if somebody doesn't read your chapter, what are they going to miss out on?
Understanding how you can very proactively impact your workforce from a physician perspective, but also what you should be thinking about in terms of training the physician leaders of tomorrow. Because I think that's what I really focus on in the chapter and I'm giving them some sense of these behaviors occur. Think about this. Think about potential solutions, how you can address that. And it involves education and awareness and being proactive in terms of planning accordingly. And I really think if they, again, if they're not aware, there could be some missed opportunities for potentially great leadership to come out of some of the folks that they work with day to day, and they're not seeing it at the time.
Oh, the missed opportunities. And so if a doctor doesn't read your chapter, what will they miss out on?
One of the things just again, where the trends are going, what to think about, in terms of maybe what's on the minds of some of their colleagues that they work with, that again, it's that same idea. It's not one size fits all. It allows us to be a little bit better in terms of collaborators and collegial with one another if we truly understand and respect those differences. I give a nuance in the chapter that is really important, and it's been written about and studied, and that's the difference in terms of how group dynamic discussions occur. And oftentimes, as a sign, not to be offensive, but as a sign of familiarity, someone in the room may refer to the female physician at the table by their first name, and they'll refer to the male physicians by doctor. Well, that doesn't set a good precedence, and that doesn't feel good for that female. And she probably isn't going to say anything during that meeting. She may say something afterwards, but that could really be seen as a level of disrespect by doing that. And we should all be very conscious about how we address our colleagues. And if everybody's going by first names, great. If we're going to distinguish that, then let's be fair and level set on that. So I think from a colleague perspective, from a physician perspective, I think we all want to work together. But I think this chapter gives you a sense maybe of what those other genders are facing from an issue perspective, how their careers are impacted, and what you personally can do to make it, again, a more collegial environment.
What impact have you seen pandemic have on this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I would say that it's been significant on a number of levels. I'd have to say, as somebody that served as the incident commander for COVID for our system for almost 3 years, I saw the best in people in terms of efforts, implementations, leadership. I truly saw the best in people come out during that time, and am very proud of the system for how they responded. But I also saw initially in our nurses and our other non-physician clinicians some significant levels of burnout, because many of them had the demands of taking care of children based at home. They had to help with their online tutoring, all the other stuff that was going on. So that had an impact in burnout. And I found that the physicians were a little bit quieter about it. But as I went out and rounded and spoke with my colleagues in the clinics and the practices and the facilities, and all genders, as I talked about that, what I found out was they were equally burnt out and wondering how they balance this all out in terms of their career. And then they were also stepping back, wondering, is this rewarding to me? Because I'm having to split my time in so many ways. Is this something I can sustain? And what if this pandemic isn't gone forever? And what if there's another one right around the corner? So I think it's different. I think people are doing a lot more introspection. I've seen people ask for more telemedicine approaches to care because they can balance their work life maybe a little bit better. And I've also seen people rethinking their careers. So it's had an impact, no question.
I think that if we looked at and somebody read your chapter, what's the best way to apply it or use it?
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. I've already highlighted in terms of paying attention to, how you treat your physicians, and, make sure that you're equally respectful across the board. I think that's important. Make sure you are aware that there is this demand on the physicians, irrespective of gender, that they have this personal life as well, that they've got to figure out how to balance. And one of the things I would highlight, and I state this in the chapter, even though we have a majority now going into medical school that are females in the classes, the problem is that in that first 5 years of their career, somewhere around that 4th or 5th year, you're having a lot of female physicians in particular questioning, can I do all of this? And does this work? And how do I balance all these things out, including it's during their reproductive years. They also are trying to balance that out. And so we lose some of them to career changes, and it can be as high as 40%. I think it's coming down a little bit, but it can be that high in terms of the number of folks that change careers, change jobs, or leave medicine altogether. So I think we, irrespective of whether you're a physician leader or you're an administrator that's not clinician, be aware of that, because that's powerful. And the only other comment I would make is there's some things we can do about that in terms of helping them balance and training and thinking about this broadly as an organization.
In the chapter, you have 10 suggestions for healthcare organizations to engage female physicians. Each one is excellent. Which is the one you absolutely want to highlight today?
The one thing that I would highlight that's so important is, again, I'm going to go back to my message, one size doesn't fit all. And don't overlook that potential leader of tomorrow, because right at this moment, they might have toddlers at home, or the pandemic's implying a lot of demands on them, and they're doing some home teaching or something like that. Remember to still include them in different efforts. Remember to include them in physician leadership training classes, etc. And even if they don't use it today, they could use it tomorrow, because we all have sort of a life cycle and our time commitments and demands change. Yes. Don't overlook them for the rest of their career. Nurture them. That's how you're going to keep them engaged with the organization and show their value, and they're going to feel relevant. So I would encourage that, when you think about that, that is probably so important, is make sure. And the other thing in there is that big opportunity may not be a big titled position that you're going to put that person in at that point in time, because they don't have the capacity, but maybe it's leading a very important effort that's focused and could really change the way we take care of patients. So I just don't want people to miss an opportunity in terms of the folks they work with.
The one that really absolutely stood out for me was this one, which is examine your compensation practices. Tell us more about this one.
Yeah, and statistically, we're still finding some discrepancies. I think we're closing the gap, which is really exciting. I think there's an awareness, and it goes back to the points I've been making. Let's educate ourselves. Let's be proactive on this.
Mm-hmm.
But, we have all sorts of different compensation models. And I would tell you that in my organizations that I've led, we've had different compensation models. We
Mm-hmm.
try to standardize it, but it always comes down to some component as a work RVU.
Mm-hmm.
And I did highlight in the chapter that, female physicians, depending on their specialty, will automatically be maybe making less because they're not a specialized physician. And then how we calculate and compensate for work RVUs has to be thought of a little more broadly,
Mm-hmm.
because we forget that going into that family meeting that is needed for that patient who's entering hospice is as important as doing a procedure on that patient in the office. And we're not always ideally good at calculating the work RVUs. So I would encourage us to think about those compensation models. I will add on to that the one other thing, which is that historically, and I experienced this early in my career, if you're not working because you just had a child and you take 4 to whatever your time frame is, 8-week leave of a childcare leave.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is historically we weren't compensated for that, because we've always had sort of eat what you hunt in terms of that mindset of how we compensate physicians. We have to do a little bit better than that. And I think the systems have really started to embrace that and recognize the need for those leaves and to compensate and aggregate some of their paid time off for that. And I also think the residency programs are doing much better, and because that was a focus of ACGME to make sure that they were compensating accordingly. I think there's this awareness as well, that people don't want to be discriminated against for any reason, including gender. So people are speaking up, and we really are leveling the playing field of the compensation, but I think there's more work to do.
Let's shift gears about not just a physician, but a physician leader. You are a very well-respected presenter at American Association of Physician Leaders and American College of Healthcare Executives, the two big bodies which teach people in leadership administration within healthcare. And you yourself have mentored. And in my opinion, we don't have a culture of mentoring physicians, especially the mentor is not compensated monetarily, let's say. I mean, there's a lot of satisfaction, but the idea that you're not going to be paid. On the other hand, there is some culture building of coaching, even though they are two very different things. What's your experience in mentoring and the benefits of being mentored?
Yeah, I think it's so important when we have the privilege of holding these positions and having achieved success as a physician leader. I think what comes with that is a responsibility to help the folks that really want to do the same thing, that have aspirations to be a physician leader. And so I've always been very open to mentoring. And as you said, I through both the American Association of Physician Leaders as well as American College of Healthcare Executives, I've offered mentorship formally. And it's not compensated. And some of my best mentoring sessions have occurred in the parking lot of the grocery store at 4 o'clock on a Saturday, because that's when you fit it in. And that's great. But I've also mentored little more informally within the organizations that I've been a leader for, because you'll get people reaching out to you saying, hey, I want to be you when I grow up. I want to do what you're doing. How did you do it? How did you break through? And those are great questions, and we need to step up and be able to answer those and help people see how they take their next steps forward. So, very rarely have I had to mentor somebody that, is because they're not performing. That happens, but usually they're waiting for an opportunity for personal growth and professional growth. And I just don't think compensation, from my perspective, is necessary. That's something that we should be honored to do, to share what we learned, to share the path that we've taken, and how they can achieve that as well.
You are very generous.
Thank you.
So if you were to give advice to a young physician, what would that be?
Yeah. It's funny, because I actually have some physicians in my family and I give advice freely. My youngest just graduated from medical school.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And, as I think about a lot of the questions, I get a lot of, how do I get that first job? And I really step them back and talk about, why do you want that first job? And do you want that to be your career? Is that in addition to clinical practice? Is it a split? I start asking those kinds of questions. Most everybody that I've coached and mentored over the year, they want to jump into that physician executive position. They see it as, wow, this is like coming to the top, and you're going to have these great positions. I always tell them, first and foremost, make sure you wear some of the tread on your clinical tires. You've got to have, it's your credibility. You know what it's like to practice medicine. You've been out there, you've done it. You can appreciate what your colleagues are going through. And when I talk to the physicians that I have the privilege of leading, they know I understand what it's like to be in clinical practice and see a lot of patients and manage all those different challenges. And I think that helps keep me grounded. So I always encourage my physicians that are thinking of aspiring to physician leadership positions, get some real experience from that clinical perspective. It will serve you well, because it gives you credibility as a leader. So that's first and foremost. And then I also talk to them about making sure that, the why do they want to do this? I have jokingly called myself the accidental physician leader, because I did not go into medical school and residency and even open my own practice thinking someday I'm going to grow up and be a physician executive. It happened by being part of different committees and a department chair, and then sitting on a board. And, my experience took me down a different pathway. And I encourage them to put their toe in the water and experience those things before they decide what they want to do ultimately with their career.
So in being accidental physician leader, what have been some of your career highlights throughout the years?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, let me just say I feel blessed that I've had the career that I've had, given opportunities. I've had people that have not been obstructionists. They have been people that have seen what a physician can bring to the table, which has been pretty exciting. And, so I've grown with my career, starting off as I said, a chair, a medical director of a smaller facility, assistant chief medical officer, onto, much bigger roles. And it's been exciting. So I would tell you, if we had all the time in the world, I'd give you some highlights from each one of my opportunities, because there's been some really exciting things. But I would tell you, one of the best things that I've experienced in my career has been that serving as that incident commander for COVID. I mean, how many times do you get a 100-year pandemic? Hopefully not again in our lives.
Yes.
But, to be at the helm and be the person that has to coordinate and reduce services and, manage capacity and find different ways to work with our providers and have patients access care and start, everything from virtual COVID clinics to infusion clinics, et cetera. But bringing the team together to do that, I got to see the very best in folks. And it was really, truly one of the more remarkable points of my career. So I enjoyed that. But again, I've been blessed with great teams. We've launched telehealth across different organizations very successfully. We've launched innovation centers across different organizations very successfully. I've even had the chance to do some broad-reaching community engagement efforts with the Robert Wood Johnson grant that changed things in Cincinnati, where I was there as Assistant Chief Medical Officer, where we worked with payers and employers in a market to really embrace chronic disease management. So there's been some fun things, but COVID's right up there on the top in terms of something that I personally felt very rewarded by.
I'm so glad that you called this fun.
It is fun.
And I hope people who are listening and watching this understand once you're in that flow, it's fun. And that fun, and you're going to miss out on that if you don't do this, the first step. So any last message before we stop?
Any last message? Let me see. Again, I think that message about educate, and educate yourself, obviously, on gender differences, that, again, one size doesn't fit all. We can do a lot with that. And I think there's a lot of hidden gems out there, a lot of great next generation physician leaders, and do everything you can to encourage their growth and development. It's exciting work. It's not easy work, no question, but it's exciting work. And I think from my perspective, learn, always learn. I mean, I was looking at a stack of books recently as I'm kind of cleaning off a shelf in my office. And some of my books, some of my courses have been so valuable that you can't unlearn that. That's information that's so useful. So ask, read, take courses, learn, keep your mind open. I think those are the big messages.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Forbes. And we were talking to Dr. Kathleen Forbes, and her chapter in this wonderful book on physician engagement is on gender issues. And obviously, it goes beyond gender issues. We are all facing that. This is something that medicine and healthcare is looking at, the future of medicine and the future of healthcare. So this isn't just like one single thing. And Dr. Forbes has wonderful, very narrow niche recommendations in the chapter that any healthcare leader or administrator will absolutely save at least tens of millions of dollars, in my opinion. So on that note, let's finish this chapter off. Do this, not that, for physician engagement, retention, and well-being. Thank you.